Here we are today in Leeds, West Yorkshire, for the very first time to meet a Gothic band called Inkubus Sukkubus.
Yes.
This is Candia and this is Tony.
Hello.
Hello.
And before we talk about your new album, let's talk about a little bit about the history of the band.
Yeah.
I've got an album called Beltane, which I understand to be a collection of your early recordings. So is there anything re-recorded?
No, all of it is a collection of our very earliest recordings. There's maybe a few early recordings that are not on it, but then they're just not good enough quality to put on a CD, really. So yeah, that is it's from 1990 to 1991.
Yeah, it was all recorded at a time the very early Inkubus Sukkubus, we kind of disbanded for a short while, and Tony and myself went on. We called ourselves Children of the Moon. We did some recordings under that name. We weren't actually gigging as such, but we recorded those songs. I mean, they've only recently really been out on CD because they were only originally meant as sort of demos. But our current record company, Resurrection Records, said that people want to hear this song. So they're a bit rougher than our later material, but people kind of like that raw edge in a way. Slightly ropey. It's the oldest songs.
Yeah. Because I was actually surprised a little bit. The first album I heard was the Vampyre album. And after that I bought the Beltane album to get an impression what your early days were like.
Yeah.
But there were not many differences. It was basically the same line of music still. So have you always been perfectly satisfied with what you're doing and you don't want to change anything?
I think on the technical side we've moved on. Tony's, the equipment Tony uses now for programming, it's a lot more advanced, a lot better sounds. We've got to hands now. If you listen to the actual sounds on the Beltane recordings, they're a lot more basic. Whereas
a much cheaper keyboard then.
Yeah.
Now I've got a Proteus, which is decent quality samples, orchestras and things. So it gives us more scope musically. But as for the actual song style, I think that we don't really want to change drastically because that's what we always intended to do, and we just basically like to let things develop naturally as opposed to pushing them. We don't believe in pushing things deliberately because that's not really natural.
Yeah, I think things have just sort of gradually, gently evolved, but we're still, the essence of the band is pretty much, I mean, we've been going nearly 9 years now, and the essence of the band is very much what it was in 1989 when we formed. We've just perhaps honed it a bit more,
Polished it.
Yeah, polished it, a bit more polished. But what we're actually about, the actual, the core of the band is very much the same as it was when we started. We've just worked on it a bit more and, a bit more polished, more embroidered, and it's getting closer to what the original essence of what we were trying to do, the original, how we envisaged Inkubus Sukkubus. I hope we're gradually getting closer to the dream that we want to do.
How big could you become over the years? You're still playing these small clubs here. Can you be satisfied with the business side of things?
Yeah, we don't think that basically with what we're doing, we know that we can never be completely mainstream.
The pagan angle particularly, we come across a few people that aren't, they're less than...
But we're having a good time going out and playing, and
it's great fun.
Yeah, so that's what we always wanted to do. So I think.
We're still kept very busy, and we still have to turn down, some gigs because we're on the go most of the time. I mean, we're not playing stadiums, but we're busy and we enjoy it. We have a great time. It's just such good fun, and it's fun by us. It's nice to sort of know the audience as well. If you keep to the smaller clubs and that, we go down and chat with the audience, and we know, like, quite, you know, sort of a fair proportion of the audience that turns up. We know them and they come time and time again, and you know, it's great. So I think perhaps larger bands sort of lose sight of that, and I know I've heard interviews with larger bands. They sort of you know, look back on the old days when we used to play smaller venues. It's more fun then. There isn't it? And you know, I mean, sort of like you get the Rolling Stones, like they play, go back to playing smaller venues and keep it like a secret gig. And I think you know, you sort of pine the days when you play smaller venues and just enjoy yourself just for the hell of it.
Yeah. Right. Today I went to the Royal Armouries in Leeds and saw all these exhibits they had, all the Christian knights.
Oh, right,
and you see they were telling all these stories about good Christian people butchering each other.
Yeah.
And this is a subject you pick up in your lyrics quite often.
Yeah, yeah.
You tend to be quite radical when it comes to this.
Well, I don't know if we're that radical. I mean, basically...
Wake of the Christian knights. And
yeah, I mean, basically we're just telling history how it was. I think a lot of people don't realise that almost all of the killing in the world has been due to the Christian Church, you know. And we just feel it's like our duty to tell people, you know. And the more people know about it, maybe the less chance of it ever happening again, you know. We're just telling it as it is, really. We're not building it up into something it wasn't, but we're just saying this is what happened. This is the thinking behind this, why this happened. So that's...
And this is still what a lot of pagans are up against, even these days. I mean, even though they're not persecuting it as much, they're not hanging or burning anymore, but still people are persecuted, like in their workplace, or you know, it's still very real, the persecution, because I mean, Christianity still has some hold on society in this country, and it's kind of difficult to be accepted if you go out and say you're a witch or a shaman, you know. Yeah, it's still very difficult to be able to come out and say it, even though, I mean, we do. You know, still people sort of look at you askance and think, okay, you're Satanist, and you know, you're very, very much looked down on. So I mean, that's why we bring up the history, because it's still happening, even though it's not as in your face. It's not as people aren't being murdered these days in our country. It's still very real. It's still there. You still need to remember that you know, people shouldn't be treated that way just because of their beliefs, because you know, they're not following mainstream religion.
Back to your new album, the Vampyre Erotica. Recently, quite many bands have picked up the subject of vampires. So, why did you do the same? What was your...
Well, we've always had songs about vampires. I've always been very interested in vampire films and literature from when I was very young, so it's candy. And I mean, on all the other albums there are songs about vampires, and we just decided we wrote the song Vampyre Erotica, and we thought it was the best track, so we had it as the title track. There are maybe a few more vampire songs on that album, but that's because a few years ago we thought it'd be really nice to have a vampire album. And so we've eventually done it, you know. It wasn't a conscious effort to jump on a bandwagon, because we'd already been doing it.
Yeah, I mean, fascinated with the mythology of vampirism. I mean, quite often we get asked by other pagans, because we have a lot of pagan supporters, and they say, well, you know, what have vampires got to do with paganism? I mean, I think it's a good question. The thing is, we write a lot about mythology, you know, world mythology or mythology, you know, English mythology, British mythology, and to us, the lore of the vampire is another aspect of mythology, and so we've taken on board that aspect, and because I mean, it's always fascinated both of us. I mean, we've always been fascinated, both of us, by witchcraft and paganism since we were very, very young, and we've also been fascinated by the darker aspect, you know, the vampiric, the lore of the vampire, be it the actual, you think about the cinematic vampire, Christopher Lee and Hammer films, that kind of side of it, or, the psychic vampire, that side which is very real. It's fascinating to us and feel inspired to write about that.